Why do the most successful people feel the most hollow? Because there's a shadow trailing every achievement, and most never see it coming. You follow the rules. You exceeded expectations. You turned your hunger into gold, your pain into polish. And now you're here, accomplished, admired, elevated. But in the quiet, something's wrong. The applause echoes, but never lands. You stand in the spotlight, and yet you feel unseen, not by others, by yourself. Because the mask you built to rise has started to feel like skin. And now you wonder if you remember who you were before you learned to be who they wanted. Carl Jung once said, "Where there is much light, the shadow is deep." And this is what he meant. The higher you climb, the louder the silence becomes. You breathe thinner air, not because it's the mountaintop, but because something in you is suffocating. You tell yourself to be grateful. But gratitude can't fill the space where your soul used to live. And the truth begins to crack through. This isn't peace, this is performance. The spotlight is warm on your face. But behind you in the wings, your shadow waits, not to sabotage you, to ask you something you've ignored for years. Do you even recognize the life you're fighting so hard to maintain? You don't fear failure, you fear exposure. Because if they saw you without the polish, without the certainty, without the mask, would they still applaud? So you keep producing, keep smiling, keep running. But deep down, you know you're not running toward a dream. You're running from a silence you've never been brave enough to sit in. And in that silence, a whisper grows louder. This isn't it. This isn't me. This isn't what I came here to do. You thought you left your fear behind, but fear has evolved. It doesn't shout anymore. It shows up as success, and that's the trap. You mistake the claps for connection, the spotlight for safety, the performance for purpose. But somewhere back there, you left a flame burning. A small, quiet fire you swore you'd come back for. The part of you that didn't need permission to exist. The part that burned not to impress, but to feel. And now, even from the heights, you see its flicker, faint but alive, still waiting. This is the moment you stop climbing. Not because you've reached the top, but because you've realized there's nothing up here that can replace what you left behind. This is where the story turns. This is where you descend, not into failure, but into truth. Because the only way forward is back through the self you abandoned to be seen. And this time you go to meet them. You didn't become excellent by accident. You became who you are because somewhere along the way you learned that love is conditional. That safety had to be earned. That approval was the reward for self-erasure. So you got good. Not just at the work, at being needed, at reading a room, at knowing what version of yourself would be most accepted. But now, no matter how much you give, how much you grow, how much you win, there's still a voice that says, it's not enough, you're not enough. You call it imposter syndrome, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's the truth trying to break through. Maybe it's the part of you that remembers you were never supposed to live like this, exiled from your own joy, apologizing for your light, shrinking to stay relatable. You keep waiting for the moment when you'll finally feel safe, finally feel seen. But every new milestone only seems to deepen the ache. Because you're not just afraid of being rejected. You're afraid of leaving people behind. Afraid that if you step fully into who you are, they won't come with you. And so you sabotage in subtle ways. You delay, you underpraise, you defer praise. You turn down the stage and call it humility. But it's not humility, it's grief. A grief for the version of you that everyone loved as long as you stayed small. There's a woman who spent 10 years behind the scenes building other people's dreams. Every time she was invited to step forward, she turned the spotlight away. Not because she wasn't ready, but because part of her still believed that visibility was betrayal. She didn't want to be too much. She didn't want to lose the love that came with being second. You know this story. because you've lived some version of it. You've learned how to self-regulate your success to avoid the pain of surpassing the tribe. You've kept yourself just visible enough to be praised, just invisible enough to stay safe. But here's the truth. You are not responsible for making others comfortable with your growth. You are not selfish for wanting more. You are not disloyal for becoming. Freud once observed that some people collapse after they succeed because they never made space to receive what they fought so hard to achieve. You're not broken for feeling empty after the win. You are just finally still enough to feel the parts of you that never stopped waiting to be brought into the light. Maybe the real fear isn't that you'll fail. Maybe the real fear is that you'll rise and become someone they no longer recognize. But listen closely. If the cost of belonging is self-abandonment, then the tribe you're shrinking to stay inside was never home. There is a version of you who never needed to be loved. A version who lit fires instead of fitting in. A version who never had to dim their power to feel safe. They're still in there, under the masks, behind the overfunctioning, beneath the loyalty to smallness. And if you listen, really listen, you'll hear them. Come back, not to the past, but to yourself. This is the echo you've been calling your fear, but it's not fear. It's your own soul asking to be remembered. It doesn't always look like fear. It looks like discipline, like overtime, like endless revisions to something already finished. It looks like almost ready, like just one more pass. Like you're perfecting the work, but really you're protecting yourself from what happens if it succeeds. Because then they'll see you. Not just the polished outcome, but the self beneath it. Carl Jung wrote, "What you do not make conscious appears in your life as fate." And fate in your life often looks like a pattern you can't explain. You rise, then something inside you pulls back. You get momentum, then delay. You feel close and suddenly exhausted. It's not random, it's not bad timing, it's the shadow. And it's not trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect you from what? From success that will require you to outgrow the version of you that kept you safe. From rising so far that you lose your old place in the tribe. From shining so brightly that someone says you've changed, and they mean it as punishment. So you hold back, not because you're unsure, because some part of you still believes you're not allowed to become who you truly are. There's a man who spent 10 years building his dream, a business, a team, a life of purpose. And just as the biggest opportunity landed in front of him, he missed the meeting. He forgot, but he didn't forget. His shadow remembered. The vow he made when he was young: don't surpass the people who love you, don't be too big, don't fly too far. He was ready for the next level. But a part of him had never given permission. Self-sabotage isn't stupidity, it's devotion. A sacred form of self-loyalty to an outdated story that used to keep you alive. But you've outgrown that story. And the longer you stay inside it, the more success will feel like betrayal. Pattern interrupt. Maybe you're not tired. Maybe you're grieving the mask you used to wear. Maybe you're not resisting the dream. You're resisting the death of who you used to be. You underprice your work and call it humility. You downplay your wins and call it maturity. But the truth is, you are negotiating every day with the part of you that thinks visibility will cost you love. And here's where Jung was right again. If you do not make it conscious, it will run your life. And you will call it fate. But it's not fate, it's fear. And that fear has a name: unintegrated shadow. A force inside you that whispers, if you go too far, you'll lose everything. But listen again. That whisper is softer now. It's not saying don't rise, it's saying rise with me. Reintroduce the flame, because somewhere deep within you a flame still burns, the first light you ever carried. The one you dimmed to make others feel comfortable. The one you swore you'd protect but ended up hiding. And that flame is not interested in your perfection. It doesn't care how impressive you look. It only asks, will you carry me into the life you actually want? Or will you keep handing the steering wheel to the part of you who only knows how to stay small? Maybe it's time to stop proving, stop negotiating. Stop earning the love you were born deserving. Maybe it's time to say, I'm not here to be saved. I'm here to be whole. And that begins when you finally face the saboteur, not as the villain, but as the voice that once kept you alive. It's time to thank it, and then to let it step aside. Because the road ahead doesn't need protection, it needs permission. And only you can give it. There's a point in every journey where the climb ends, not because you've reached the top, but because something in you knows, I can't keep going like this. Not one more performance. Not one more smile that doesn't reach your eyes. Not one more day pretending this version of success still fits, and then you stop. Not dramatically, quietly, subtly, you stop returning messages. You stop showing up fully, you start unraveling. Not because you're falling apart, but because the mask is what was once armor has become a cage. And now you can't breathe inside it. This is what Jung called the nigredo, the blackening, the breakdown. The moment when your soul says, enough pretending, come back. And here's the paradox. This collapse doesn't come from failure. It comes from success that outpaced your authenticity. It comes from achieving everything except yourself. John Stuart Mill knew it. By the age of 20, he was everything the world said a genius should be. And yet one day he asked himself, if all my dreams came true, would I feel joy? The answer was no, and it shattered him, because he realized that he had built a life that impressed everyone except the person living it. Maybe your sadness isn't burnout. Maybe it's the soul grieving the distance between who you are and who you've had to be. You didn't lose your passion. You buried it beneath what was palatable. You didn't forget your purpose. You just wrapped it in a persona that kept you acceptable, and now it's breaking. The spotlight fades, the applause dies down. You find yourself alone in the silence. And in that silence, a voice begins to speak. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't blame. It simply asks, are you ready to be real yet? This is the descent. Not into failure, but into truth. The forest grows darker, the road disappears. You are no longer being guided by recognition. You're being called inward. And that's when you meet the shadow, not as a demon, not as a threat, but as a mirror, carrying every part of you you left behind on the way up. And here we integrate the story. In Hans Christian Andersen's forgotten tale, The Shadow, a man sends his shadow across the street to see what he cannot. The shadow grows, it becomes cunning, powerful. It returns and overtakes him, kills him, takes his place. Why? Because what you exile doesn't disappear, it evolves. The more you ignore the shadow, the more it begins to run your life. Until one day it walks back into the room, stronger than you, hungrier, colder. That's the risk. Not that your shadow ruins you, but that it becomes you when you stop listening. But you're not that man. You've stopped. You've turned. You're facing it now. And in the dark, you see it clearly. Not a monster, a memory. Not your enemy, your truth. The child who learned to disappear. The artist who gave up wonder for utility. The leader who carried everyone else's needs and forgot how to ask for their own. You kneel, not in defeat, but in reverence, because now you remember. In the ashes of everything you thought you were, there it is, still burning, that tiny flame. The one you left behind when you thought the climb was more important than the warmth. The one that waited patiently, silently for you to come back. This is not the end, this is the reckoning. Not with failure, but with the self. And when you walk out of this forest, because you will, you'll carry something you never had before. Not success, not recognition, not applause, but fire. The kind that doesn't burn you out. The kind that doesn't flicker in performance. The kind that lights the path back to the life you were always meant to live. that it would attack you, accuse you, shame you, that it would demand penance for all the parts of yourself you silenced to survive. But it doesn't. It just stands there, quiet, patient, as it always has. And suddenly you realize it's not there to punish you. It's been waiting to be loved. Because your shadow was never the villain, it was the bodyguard. The one who stepped in when you had no voice. The one who learned how to protect you by hiding the parts no one else seemed to want. You meet its eyes, and for the first time you don't turn away. You listen, and it speaks. I'm the rage you swallowed to stay polite. I'm the desire you buried to look humble. I'm the voice you shut down because someone once called it too much. I'm the joy you rationed, the ambition you feared, the truth you dressed up to sound acceptable. You realize you didn't outgrow your shadow, you outpaced it. And now it's calling you back to the parts you disowned on your way to being admired. Maybe healing isn't about fixing the wound. Maybe it's about welcoming the one who was wounded into the life you've built without them. You look at the flame again, the one still burning at the center of your soul. The one you nearly forgot. It didn't die. It just got tired of competing with the performance. And now it asks, will you carry me forward? Not as a secret, as the source. Carl Jung wrote that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is what he meant. You don't erase the shadow, you integrate it, you learn its language, you hold its pain. And in return, it gives you your power back, not the loud kind, the real kind. Kind that doesn't need to be seen to know it's real. You begin to understand that every time you held yourself back, it wasn't weakness, it was grief. Grief for the parts of you that never got to come with you. Grief for the version of you who thought success required self-abandonment. And now you're done grieving. Now you begin remembering. Not just who you are, but who you were before the world convinced you that wholeness was too much to ask for. You start picking up the pieces, the misfit passions, the silenced opinions, the inconvenient truths, and you invite them back. Not just into your awareness, into your life. This is the sacred reunion. The moment when your future finally makes space for your full past. When you stop apologizing for your depth, your feeling, your hunger, your fire. You are no longer a brand. You are no longer a mask. You are no longer a curated version of a real thing. You are the real thing. And now, with the shadow beside you, not beneath you, you are ready to rise again. But this time you won't rise alone. You rise with your voice intact, your softness intact, your sovereignty intact. Because this time you are whole. You return to the world, but this time you bring your soul with you. The calendar still fills, the expectations still arrive. But you're no longer navigating your life as a performance to survive. You speak not to impress, but to connect. You act not to prove, but to express. Because the war inside you has ended. Not because you won, but because you stopped fighting parts of yourself that were never your enemy. Now the shadow walks beside you. The mask has been set down. The flame that once flickered in secret is steady now, not hidden, not weaponized, but integrated. And you know the truth. You were never broken, you were buried. Beneath the pressure, beneath the polish, beneath the long list of things you thought you had to be worthy of love. You are no longer chasing a version of success that costs you yourself. You have remembered the difference between being admired and being whole. And now, for the first time, you no longer fear the light because you are no longer afraid of your shadow. You see now what this journey has always been, not about becoming more, about becoming you. The child who once lit a fire just to feel alive. The leader who knew how to love without losing himself. The artist who created not for approval, but for truth. They are all still here. And now, they walk with you. You are not behind. You are not late. You're not too much. You are right on time for the life your soul has been trying to remember. This is integration, not a destination, a return. And it's not the end, it's the threshold. So if this story stirred something in you, if you felt seen, if you recognize the patterns you've been afraid to name, don't walk away in silence. Say something. In the comments, in your journal, in the next conversation where you dare to be honest again. Because someone else is still out there, shrinking their light, dimming their voice, wearing the mask you just took off. And they need to know that it's safe to come home. That the shadow isn't the end of their success, it's the beginning of their wholeness. If this helped you remember something you forgot, like it, share it. Subscribe so the next soul who's ready can find this message waiting for them, not for metrics, for meaning. Let this be the story that reminds someone they're not alone. That they don't need to keep earning their place in the world by abandoning themselves. Let this be the light that finds the shadow and says, you're not too much. You're not unsafe. You're not a threat. You are the fire. The same fire you thought you had to hide just to belong. But now you know the truth. You don't belong in anyone's shadow. You carry your own light. And this time you're not putting it out.